Hi, welcome to this video of Demon Hanzo. Getting set up right now. Starting in with a Prussian blue mixed with a little bit of a medium gray just to keep the saturation down a little bit. Laying in my base skin tone. Something I've been working on lately with Hanzo is making sure he doesn't look white, even though I normally would not lay down this base layer, just because I like working with very light and flowing kind of feels, ethereal. But I wanted to make sure I didn't fall into that trap again. Adding in a little bit more saturated of that Prussian blue, one of my favorite colors from Winsor Newton. Adding in some value, just kind of get those first shadows blocked in and define some of the different features. Now I'm adding in a little bit of a mixed purple. Again, a little bit desaturated just as I'm figuring out where everything is going to go and trying to get some base value in. Say, I am definitely not an expert watercolor. It wasn't my focus when I went to art school, but I do love it and I am mostly self-taught. I did have some masking fluid laid down on this piece, which I've been experimenting with lately. You can see that's kind of the yellowish tone on his tattoo and in his hair ribbon. Here I'm using a Wagon heat gun, a little $20 thing you can grab at any hardware store. I got mine from Lowe's. And it's fantastic if you're like me and don't have a lot of time to just let things dry naturally or use too much water a lot, which I am also very guilty of. So you just hit your paper with that, drives everything up, and you can continue working. Here I'm using a kind of a wet onto wet. I put down a lot of water, loaded my brush up with water and pigment, and just layering in quickly so it'll diffuse naturally. Here I'm trying to mix up my next color for the hair, and again it is kind of a purple that's been desaturated with just a little bit of gray. And at this point things start to come together as you add in those darker values. When everything is pretty much just a light gray or blue, it definitely blends together and it can make it feel a lot softer than it's going to end up being. So when you start adding in these little bit darker values with that reddish purple, and then up here with a more desaturated purple, it just helps start to actually bring the to get a full range of value, I should say. And the further you push that dark value, the more dynamic your piece is going to look. Adding in some more of this kind of tearing away fragmentation and detailing around the dragon, and introducing this kind of pure, not really fuchsia, but this very bright reddish pink, and working with the horns and then adding blue into that so it gets a nice natural purple blend going on. Darkening the top lip, which is purely a stylistic decision. Of course, in reality, your top lip does not get that much shadow. But it's an effect that I have always liked in my paintings, so it's just a little something I like to put in. Bringing in more purple and more of that pink, spreading it around the painting so it doesn't look so stark. As you can see, as you start to define that beard and bringing in darker tone each sweep, his face starts to feel a little more three-dimensional, things get defined, and it starts looking a little bit more like a finished painting. Now this is where I think I may have overworked the paper a little bit as I was building in those colors with the purple and the blue on his throat and neck, and then going back into his face. Just getting everything to dry once again. I want to make sure I'm either working on a very wet paper or on a bone dry paper. In between, I don't know, I tend to not be able to get good results. And adding in some of those beautiful eyelashes he is so famous for. and defining the features, making sure my edges are crisp where they need to be, adding in some wispiness, and smaller hairs around the beard and jawline. And then deciding to take his hair away from that desaturated, I instead add in some highly saturated purples and to bleed that into the vapor effect. Here I'm adding in his tattoos, adding a little bit of a more brushed on look than necessarily that flat, very crisp look that he has in game or on model. And I specifically wanted to do these kind of wispy, dragony effects on the tail, so I chose not to do his tattoo. That's the mask, the Oni mask. Getting everything nice and dry again. And gently, gently, gently removing some of that masking fluid that's dried. Definitely still getting used to using it and getting it to come off without smearing into that white or ripping the paper up. And I'm going to use a little gold leaf. I forgot what brand it was, and on the bottle it literally just says liquid gold leaf. So it's super descriptive. To add in some detailing on his face, a bridge piercing, some banding on his horns, nose ring, lip ring, just really playing around with the ornamentation and the luxurious feel I wanted this to have. Adding some little details with that gold and starting to add in these loops and kind of brush marks that add to the movement of the piece and that swirling up. And then going in with a little bit of colored pencil to smooth some areas out and to add in some subtler tones and textures in the hair and on the lips and around the nose. And these are just Prismacolor softcore pencils. I have the 24 set, so I was working with what I got. All this is just I lost some of the vibrancy of that pink tone, and I wanted to make sure I brought it in around the face to help pull attention in since I have so much going on right next to it. But having those intense colors up against the darkness of his beard and his eyes, etc., can really help pull the eye. And here I'm using a white gel pen that goes on kind of transparent and then gets a little bit wider towards the end. And here's the finished piece, which I'm very happy with. Cleaned up a little bit in Photoshop just to make the white an actual white of the paper.